Hi everyone, my name's Jen. I'm an author and a book reviewer, and I'm here today to do my very large holiday gift guide, which is all focused on books. If you have been here for the past, I don't know how many years I've been doing this, quite a few. What I used to do when I did gift guide videos was just give generic recommendations of books that had come out recently, especially beautiful editions that I thought may make good gifts. But what I have done in more recent years is do a Dear Jen /Santa video where I ask you to send me your book gift conundrums and then I answer them. So for instance, many of you have messaged me saying things like, Dear Jen, I need a gift for my mum. She loves these things and these things and these things. What would you recommend? Now, I can't answer every single one of those in this video because you sent me over 300 of them, and thank you very much for doing so. I have made a list of some of them here. I think between 60 or 70 requests. I lost count. So I will answer those here. If I didn't get round to answering yours and you still are stuck, leave a comment in the comment section and I will type a reply to you instead. Because I'm answering so many requests in this video, and for each one, or some of them I have one book recommendation, but for some of them I have 2 or 3. I'm not gonna list them in the description box down below because that is too many. But what I am gonna do, RIP to editing me, is insert the covers as I'm talking about them. And if you want to grab a pen and a piece of paper to note down any titles that pique your interest as I'm speaking, I recommend that you do. If you miss any of the titles, you would like me to clarify anything, if you are visually impaired and cannot see the images that I'm putting on the screen, obviously I will speak the titles too, but in case you miss anything, you need me to clarify anything, leave a comment down below and I will be happy to do that. It's just trying to find a balance of making this as accessible as possible for you to watch and listen to, but also as accessible as possible for me to make as a creator who has, you know, exactly an arthritis and some visual issues as well. We'll figure it out together. So yes, lots of book recommendations. We should probably just get into it, but before I do, I just wanted to mention that I am doing Vlogmas this year over on Patreon, which I have done for the past 4 years. Vlogmas traditionally is where people would upload a video every day on the run up to Christmas, normally the 1st to the 24th, and they'd be long form vlogs. I can't do that amount of content. So what I am doing is still uploading all my regular content on YouTube here, free for everybody to watch. That's a video every Sunday throughout December, as I do every month. But if you would like a little bit extra and would like to help support this channel, I'm uploading Vlogmas videos over on Patreon every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday in December. And that is an extra, if I've counted correctly, 10 videos throughout December. And if you would like access to those, it's $2 for the whole month, and that money goes towards supporting me making more free content for you all on here. They are not the same kind of videos as you would find on my channel, as in, you know, edited and very, very long. They're gonna be shorter. Some of them are gonna be in one takes. Some of them are gonna be me going through my shelves or answering bookish questions. That's what I've done for the past, as I said, about 4 years over on Patreon, which is a place where you can support creators. So if that is of interest to you, if you would like something extra, link is in the description box down below, but that's just an add-on. As I said, all my usual content will still be here on YouTube for free for everybody to watch. Okay, that was a bit of housekeeping. Let's dive into this big list of bookish conundrum requests that I am gonna try and solve. This video is very kindly sponsored by Serious Readers too, but we'll talk about that in a bit. Okay, I have a big glass of water next to me because I think I'm going to need it. Number 1, Dear Jen, I am looking for a book for myself with complicated sister relationships, please. So I have 3 that I would like to recommend. On the whole, throughout this video, I'm going to be trying to recommend books that I have already read and loved and can give my stamp of approval. But occasionally I will also recommend books that I haven't yet read, but I think particularly fit a specific request. So I have here 2 that I've read and 1 that I haven't yet read. The first one is called Playing Games by Huma Qureshi. I read it this month and absolutely fell in love with it. it kind of destroyed me a bit. It made me cry, but not in a desperately tragic way, just in a this book deeply moved me, these characters felt very real way. So that's about two sisters, one of whom appears to be very, in inverted commas, sorted in her life. She's married, she's trying to have kids with her husband, they have a house together, and then her younger sister is someone who's trying to make it as a writer, and I think they're both a bit jealous of each other. One is jealous of supposed freedom and one is jealous of supposed stability, and the younger sister, trying to make it as a writer, decides to write about her sister, and that doesn't go that well. I absolutely love that book. I would also recommend, just peering up my notebook in case you're wondering where I'm looking, Consumed by Arifa Akbar, which is a non-fiction book about a sibling relationship where one sister is talking about the other after their death. It was shortlisted or longlisted for the Jalak Prize a couple of years ago, and I really enjoyed that one too. The book that I haven't read yet is called When We Were Sisters by Fatima Asghar, and I've read their poetry before and really enjoyed it, but this novel sounds brilliant too. Okay, number 2, Jen, I'm looking for a book on living with disability. Cozy, beautiful, feels like chatting with a new friend. Similar in vein, please, to Some of Us Just Fall by Polly Atkin. That's a book I read recently and I really liked it. Polly's writing about nature as well as disability, diagnosis, childhood. I would recommend Still Life by Josie George if you haven't read that one yet. That definitely feels like cozying up with a new friend. Josie's talking about chronic illness. She's talking about noticing beauty in the everyday and also about creating friendships when you're chronically ill and mostly at home as well. I would also recommend checking out my Barbellion Prize vlogs. The Barbellion Prize is currently on hiatus, which is sad, but for the past few years they've released a long list in December, January, all for fiction, non-fiction and poetry that centres disability and chronic illness. And for the past couple of years I have read and reviewed all of the long-listed books, so I will link those videos in the description box down below. Next up, Jen, I'm looking for an adult Watership Down. Now, I would recommend checking out books by Lalaine Poole because Watership Down obviously is about rabbits, and I suppose you could recommend Animal Farm by George Orwell as allegorical type books that are about animals but are also about community. But if you would like a deep dive into the minds of animals, she has written The Bees, which is about a hive. More recently, she released Pod, which I didn't enjoy. It was quite a Marmite book though. So many people loved it, and that is about a pod of dolphins, but also about people as well. So maybe look that one up if that one is something you think you might be interested in, because as I said, even though I didn't love it, lots of other people did. Next, someone's asked for 2 recommendations, one for books with circus themes and one for a book where siblings of someone with a disability has a role to play because they're a sibling themselves and they're always looking for books to recognise themselves in. Both of these things can be quite tricky because circuses, I find, well, circus books can be a bit problematic when it comes to disability representation, especially if it's historical fiction. But I would recommend Circus of Wonders by Elizabeth McNeil. This is a novel about a woman called Nell who has birthmarks all over her body and her father sells her to the circus. Elizabeth McNeil is not disabled herself, but I worked with her on this book when it came to disability representation, and I think that the book is brilliant, so I would recommend that one. The reason why the sibling book can be tricky is because historically, especially, publishers have liked to centre non-disabled experiences when it comes to books that include disability, and that's often written from a non-disabled perspective as well, which can mean that the disability representation itself is not that great, even though you may get the perspective of a sibling who is not disabled. So trying to pick and choose a book can be hard, but I would really recommend A Kind of Spark by Elle McNichol, which is an Own Voices disability book, but focuses on, amongst other things, sibling relationships, and I think is wonderful. Next up, Jen, I'm really interested in horror, but not as a separate category. I find that boring. It has to be sci-fi or fantasy and then get scarier and scarier unexpectedly. I love this because this is what I really enjoy as well. I would recommend The Book of Strange New Things by Michelle Faber, which is about a man called Peter who's sent across the universe to preach the word of God to this alien life form, and things just get weird. I mean, that sounds kind of weird anyway, but things get weirder and more tense, and it's very claustrophobic and stressful. I'd also recommend The Beauty by Ali Whiteley, which I don't think I would classify as horror first and foremost, but definitely has horror elements. It's a post-apocalyptic book where women don't exist anymore in human form. They are now fungi. So yeah, it's a bit weird and creepy, a very short and atmospheric book. I also think The Employees by Olga Round would seep into this category as well, which is a sci-fi novel about a spaceship full of humans and humanoids who discover this weird thing on a planet which is egg-shaped, and they all become very attached to it, and it's about what it means to be human. But again, it becomes quite cloying and claustrophobic and thought-provoking. I really loved it. Next up, Jen, can you recommend a book that's funny and weird and surreal without treading into the territory of violent, gross, or body horror? I'm not sure if this is exactly the kind of thing you're looking for, but when I think of funny and surreal, I don't tend to read loads of funny books, but I did think about a book that was on this year's Women's Prize long list, which is The Dog of the North by Elizabeth Mackenzie. It was a book I was very apprehensive about reading because I'd read her debut novel, A Portable Veblen, and did not gel with the humour style at all. But this one I found really endearing. It's about a woman who's basically having a life crisis, and she goes on a bit of a road trip of self-discovery, but all these things keep happening to her and the people around her. And yeah, it got me in the feels, but it was very laughter filled as well. So that might be one that you want to check out. Jen, can you recommend a short book that plays with language in some way? I've really enjoyed Flowers for Algernon and LMNOP. I would maybe recommend Max Porter's books. They are short, and I think that he's very playful when it comes to language. His most recent book is called Shy, which is about a teenage boy who's in this almost detention center-like place and is trying to understand who he is and how he should, in inverted commas, be behaving and how he can communicate and connect with people. But my favourites by him are Lanny and Grief is a Thing with Feathers, so maybe check out the blurbs for those too. Maybe more in line with the titles that you have mentioned, a bit of a softer book would be The Housekeeper and the Professor by Yoko Ogawa, which is about a housekeeper who goes to a professor's house, and this professor has memory loss. He can remember, I think it's 80 minutes at a time, and then his memory resets, so she's constantly having to reintroduce herself to him, and it's got mathematical elements but is also about language and memory as well. Next up, Jen, I would like a recommendation for my boyfriend who is dyslexic. A comic book / graphic novel, maybe. The one that I always recommend when it comes to recommending graphic novels to adults is The Gigantic Beard That Was Evil by Stephen Collins. I go back to it time and time again. I think that it is extremely powerful and can really get under your skin. So take a look at that. It's a bit dystopian. I think I said a book for our times whenever it came out, 2016, 2017, sadly is still a book for our times. So I would recommend that. Jen, I would like a dark comedy book, please. Boy Parts by Eliza Clark. That is definitely dark and definitely funny. This is a novel about a 20-something-year-old woman called Irina who works in a bar in Newcastle but really wants to make it as a photographer. But it's very twisted. She wants to use photography to get revenge on men who have wronged her. Yeah, I would recommend looking up trigger warnings for this book before you pick it up, but I loved it. I listened to the audiobook too, which was particularly great. Next, Jen, I'm looking for a philosophy-rich novel for my partner who rarely reads fiction. He usually reads philosophy, political and science non-fiction. I would go for Arcadia by Ian Pearce, which is my go-to recommendation for a request like this because I think that it tends to get very good reception. It's about a writer who's creating a world, but then the line between reality and fiction becomes really blurred. It's also science fiction and has an element of time travel, quite meta. It's just brilliant. I haven't spoken to anyone who hasn't loved it. So yeah, I would recommend that. If you're looking for a shorter book, I would maybe also recommend the book We Had to Delete This Post by Hannah Befforts, which is a Dutch novel translated by Emma Rolt, I think. I don't have it to hand. I think that that's right. If it's not, I will correct myself on the screen. But this is a creepy book about content moderation online, and I think would fit this prompt as well. Next, Jen, I love the Hopkins manuscript, which I read on your recommendation. Can you think of anything similar? So the Hopkins manuscript was my second favourite book of a couple of years ago. It was written in the run-up to the Second World War by R.C. Sheriff, and is a science fiction novel about the moon colliding with the Earth, but was really representing unease in Europe at the time. And recently, I've read The Midwich Cuckoos by John Wyndham, and I think this has a really similar feel to it. It was written in, I think, 1957, very much inspired, I think, again, by the Second World War, but in this case, the aftermath. And it's about a village where all the women fall pregnant, and then they have babies that are not really their children, and they all seem to be able to connect with each other's minds, and it feels as though there's been an invasion in this village. And the narration style is quite similar to the Hopkins manuscript, because it's like someone collecting data on an event that is happening in the hope that someone in the future will read it. Next up, in a similar vein, someone said, Jen, I've loved Doreen and The House Opposite, both by Barbara Noble, based on your recommendations, and I love them. Can you recommend something similar? I would recommend A Single Thread by Tracy Chevalier, which I think has a similar warmth to it and is set in the interwar periods. But I would also recommend, for some reason, and I don't know why, All the Little Bird Hearts by Victoria Lloyd Barlow, which is a more contemporary book. But again, I think the narration style is quite similar. Perhaps because, like with Doreen and The House Opposite, which are World War II novels, this is a novel that feels comforting but is unsettling at the same time. I would also recommend going through the Persephone catalogue as well. They publish Barbara Noble, and they, on the whole, publish books, forgotten classics, mainly written by women. One that springs to mind that I would maybe recommend above the others is Daddy's Gone A-Hunting by Penelope Mortimer. That is a book that I think was it written in the 1950s? I just Googled and it was published in 1958. Yes, it is about mother-daughter relationships. It's about pregnancy and it's about abortion. And I remember really enjoying that one. Next up, someone said, Jen, I would like a witty audiobook based on an extended what-if scenario. The Bee Sting by Paul Murray is a very long family saga, which can feel farcical in places because they do not communicate with each other, and the dad in particular keeps on making very poor decisions which make the situation worse. So I do feel as though it is a bit of a what if type book. What if I just keep making these awful decisions? What if I don't communicate with my family? What if I just keep catastrophizing and keep on going, even though this is going to lead me nowhere good? The narration is so brilliant. It's narrated by different people depending on which character is narrating a particular chapter. Yeah, I thought it was great. It's currently, as I'm filming this, on the Booker Prize shortlist too. Hi Jen, I'm looking for a book for my dad who has recently read and loved Bob Mortimer's books, like cycling, golf, and going behind the scenes of history, etc. I would recommend a book by Ed Brooke Hitching called Fox Tossing, Octopus Wrestling, and Other Forgotten Sports. If your dad is into history and sports and ridiculousness, because if he likes Bob, he's into ridiculousness, then I think this book will definitely be right up his street. Jen, I'm struggling to find a book for my dad because he is quite busy but used to love reading sci-fi and fantasy, but he also has pretty problematic views on the world, and I would love to find a short book to open his mind a little bit. I can't remember how long this book is. It's not that long. I wouldn't say it's the shortest either, but it's another one that's currently on the Booker Prize shortlist and is my personal favourite, and I hope it wins. And this is Prophet Song by Paul Lynch, which is a dystopian book set in Ireland and shows how small-ish decisions by governments can spiral and snowball into catastrophe. It stressed me out a lot, but it is absolutely brilliant. Jen, I'm looking for a book about curses that affect multiple generations and multiple generations of families, like Born Weird by Andrew Kaufman. Chloe Benjamin has a book, doesn't she? Let me quickly Google, which is about families and curses. In fact, when I read the blurb, I remember thinking, that sounds like Andrew Kaufman's Born Weird. Yes, so this is a book called The Immortalists, which I haven't read, but is about a group of siblings who all know the date that they're going to die, which I think is what the premise of Born Weird is as well, and then you follow them over the decades and how that impacts their lives. I also wanted to recommend this book, which I haven't read either, called La Kiriboto by Ayodele Alofintuade. And I don't think this is about an actual curse, but it's about a family who think that they have a curse on them because a male family member tells the women that they are cursed, but really it's because he's done something bad and he's trying to cover his tracks. The blurb says that the women in this family, together with the help of their queer aunt, must wrestle back control of their lives as the patriarchal traditions that govern the family push back against their freedoms. It mixes family saga, mobster pulp, and queer coming of age. It is a staggeringly original and surprising novel about Nigeria's queer and feminist communities. So that one sounds great. It's on my TBR, but I haven't yet read it. Next up, Jen, I'm looking for a literary thriller. Have you read the Darren Matthews series by Attica Locke? The first one is called Bluebird, Bluebird. I think it's great. Jen, I'm looking for an immersive book, preferably not scary. When I think of immersive, I do think of Sarah Waters, because there's something about her books. They're just so atmospheric and you feel completely lost in them. And the one I actually find myself thinking about the most is The Paying Guests, which is one of her more, I was going to say more contemporary. It is still historical. I think it's set in the early 1900s, but it is a book about lodgers and a crime that happens. And it's not scary, but it is tense in places. And yeah, it will really, really grip you. I'd recommend the audiobook of all of her books because they're narrated brilliantly. I'd also recommend Yellowface by Rebecca F. Kuang, which again is a very, very tense book, which makes it feel very immersive and compelling, but is not scary. I'm sure you've heard about Yellowface because it's been everywhere this year, but if you haven't, it's about two writers, one of whom dies, and the writer who doesn't die steals a manuscript by the now dead writer and publishes it under her name. She also changes her name to make herself sound Chinese, even though she is white, to help promote the book, which is about Chinese history. It is an expose of the publishing industry, and again, I loved it. I read it in, I can't remember if it was 1 or 2 sittings. It may have been 2 because I needed to go to sleep. But if I hadn't needed to go to sleep, I would have done it in 1 sitting. Jen, I would like to get my sister-in-law a book. She is a neuropsychologist and loves reading about elderly characters and mental health. Has she read The Unlikely Pilgrimage of Harold Fry? I know that this is an older book. Well, it's not ancient, but it's been out for maybe 10 years or so. I love that book very, very much. It's about a man called Harold Fry who decides to walk from Devon to Northumberland to visit his dying friend. The rest of this comment also mentioned books about characters with dementia. I would recommend the book Elizabeth is Missing if you haven't read that either. Again, I read that maybe about 10 years ago and remember loving it. I haven't revisited it since, so I'm not sure it would hold up, but I know it was very beloved at the time. Okay, we're about, I think, halfway through, so let me briefly have a chat with you about Serious Readers, who are very kindly sponsoring this video. Serious Readers is a company that I have been working with for a few years. They create reading lights. You can see this one up here. I will do a cutaway so that you can see it properly. This is their high definition light, and I use it every single day and have been using it every day since they sent it to me over 2 years ago now. Serious Readers are a UK company. They make all of their Serious lights range in the UK. The bulb that is in this high definition light and other lights in their Serious lights range uses something called daylight wavelength technology, which is a thing that they invented, and it mimics daylight as closely as possible to create a natural light feeling even when it's dark, which is brilliant because obviously it is getting darker earlier because the clocks have gone back, and it means that I can read more comfortably for longer. And I think that this is something that should prove how good these lights are, apart from me just talking about them. These lights are so brilliant that the technology in them is used in spaceships and also in submarines. Yeah, I think that speaks for itself. If you would like to check them out, I will leave a link in the description box down below. Serious Readers has also given me a code which you can use, and that code is SR404, which will get you £100 off a high definition light and free delivery. They ship worldwide. They're a lovely company to work with, and I'm very thankful to them for sponsoring this video. I'm working with them throughout autumn and winter, as you probably have noticed, and it is a pleasure to do so. So thank you to them, and go check them out if you would like to. Now, back to the book recommendations. Hi Jen, I am looking for a cozy, heartwarming book like The Tea Dragon Society. I feel like I've recommended quite a few of those recently. We've got The Seance Tea Party by Romina Yee, which is about a girl called Laura who makes friends with a ghost and is grappling with growing up and what that means for her identity. I would also recommend other Kay O'Neill titles like Aquacorn Cove. I would recommend Garlic and the Vampire by Brie Paulson and Garlic and the Witch, which are cozy middle grade graphic novels which can be enjoyed by adults too. But because I've recommended all of those quite recently, I thought I would flag a book that's on my TBR that I haven't got to yet, which is called Taproot, which is about a gardener who falls in love with a ghost. I feel like that might be up all of our streets as well. Next, I had lots of people asking for picture book recommendations, and I could talk at length about picture books. If you would like some of my own books, I've written a trilogy of picture books called the Franklin and Luna series. The first one is called Franklin's Flying Bookshop, which is about a dragon called Franklin who loves books and wants to share them with as many people as he can, but the locals are scared of him. But then one day he meets a girl called Luna who isn't scared of Franklin because she's read all about dragons in books, and together they come up with a plan to build a bookshop on Franklin's back and introduce it to all of the locals. So I would recommend those. I am biased, but you may want to check them out. They're illustrated by the fantastic Katie Harnett. Then these are 10 other picture books that I happen to love as well. I'm not going to do the blurbs here, but you can Google them to see some of the illustrations and read about them in more depth. But 10 of my favorites off the top of my head are The Marvelous Fluffy Squishy Itty Bitty, which is the best title ever. What Happened to You by James Catchpole, which is a book I wish I had had as a disabled child. Camberski by Raymond Antrobus, which is illustrated by Polly Dunbar. This is a book about deafness and getting hearing aids. How to Make Friends with a Ghost is a warm, fuzzy, cozy, delightful book about befriending a ghost. I mean, it's in the title. I Am Dog is a very silly book about a dog who causes chaos, and if any children have family pets, I think this will be appreciated. Nabil Steals a Penguin is a picture book about a boy who steals a penguin from a zoo. It's delightful. The Roller Coaster Ride is a book about going out for the day with a grandparent, and it also has incidental limb difference representation in it. The Girl Who Loves Bugs, again, has incidental disability representation, is also about a queer family too. It is about a girl who loves bugs so much that she decides she's going to bring them into her house, and that doesn't go quite according to plan. Avocado Asks is a really lovely picture book about an avocado who's having an identity crisis, because some people tell avocado that they're a fruit and some people tell them that they are a vegetable, and they don't really know what to think. And does it matter? And then finally, I would recommend A Superpower Like Mine, which is a book about celebrating difference and disability and inclusion, and it's great. So those are 10 books that I would recommend, but I also work for a company called Inclusive Books for Children, and I'll link their website in the description box down below. Myself, along with a host of other reviewers, have been reviewing hundreds and hundreds of picture books and celebrating our most favourite ones. And it's not just picture books, it goes up to books for 9-year-olds. So if you're looking for a book for a child anywhere from 0 to 9, we have so many recommendations on that website, so go and check it out. Jen, I am looking for literary fiction with weird or horror elements, possibly with romance subplots. I loved Our Wives Under the Sea by Julia Armfield and Woman Eating by Claire Coder. Both of those books have slight romancy elements to them, but are deeply unsettling and strange and supernatural. So I would recommend Children of Paradise by Camilla Gradova, which is grungy and grimy, and it's about a girl called Holly who starts working at this independent cinema where strange things seem to be happening. And I would also recommend Mrs. March by Virginia Fito, which is about a woman whose husband is an author, and she finds out that people think he's written about her in his most recent book, and she becomes really paranoid about why he's done that. I loved it. It was my favourite book of a couple of years ago. Jen, I'm looking for Bluebeard/Beauty and the Beast retellings like Jane Eyre and Rebecca. A naive woman with a house with secrets and a mysterious man. The Book Collector by Alice Thompson is a riff on Jane Eyre, also has fairy tale elements. It's about a woman called Violet who marries a man that she's only just met and then realizes that maybe he killed his previous wife and is doing other strange things. It's great. I would also recommend work by Emily Carroll. She's written 2 graphic novels that fall into this category. When I Arrived at the Castle is a queer horror story, Bluebeard retelling, and A Guest in the House is a longer form graphic novel which has Rebecca vibes about a woman who marries a man whose previous wife died and may or may not be haunting the house that they live in. Next up, Jen, I need a fiction book that explores parasocial relationships on social media. I have so many for you because I have read so many this year. There's I'm a Fan by Sheena Patel, which is about a woman who's obsessed with a man on Instagram who is obsessed with another woman on Instagram. And everyone is detestable, they're awful, but it's great. The Subtweet by Vivek Shraya is about 2 musicians, one of whom records a cover of the other artist's song. That cover becomes more successful than the original song, and the artist who wrote that song has to pretend that she doesn't mind because it kind of boosts her career. And as the title would imply, there is a lot of social media stuff going on too. Idol Burning by Rinasami is a Japanese novel about idolizing idols and about how we put people on pedestals. It's about a teenage girl who is obsessed with this J-pop star who then reportedly hits his girlfriend, and she doesn't know how to feel about that because the image of him that she has in her head isn't actually related to who he is in person at all. Chrysalis by Anna Metcalf is a literary fiction novel which has an inkling of The Vegetarian by Han Kang because it's told from 3 different perspectives, never from the woman's perspective who all the other characters are fixated on. And it's about how she escapes real life through using YouTube and making videos, and how other people see her, how they gaze at her but can never quite reach her. So definitely about parasocial relationships. Also Underbelly by Anna Whitehouse is about 2 friends who, well, become friends because their kids are friends at school, but because of class division and other things, they probably never would have met if it weren't for their children. And they are in an actual relationship because they meet each other, but a lot of how that relationship plays out is determined by how they behave on social media too. So it's a bit of a mixture of both. Next, Jen, my partner likes thrillers and is a big history nerd. He really enjoyed the Shardlake series. His favourite modern day thriller writer is Claire Douglas. This is a beast of a book and may not be up his street. I also haven't read it, so I can't say that I personally love it, but I am always excited to read it. Just haven't got around to reading it yet because I've read other books by him and absolutely love them. And that's an instance of The Finger Post by Ian Pearce. It is a crime novel set in the 1600s and people seem to worship it. So if he hasn't read that and he has the time, then that would be my recommendation. Jen, I am looking for a book for someone who loved The Argonauts by Maggie Nelson. I thought about Chris Kraus and Moya David, but I wanted more. Boulder by Eva Balthazar is about gender in relationships and about thinking about children and whether or not you want them, and it is about queerness. The Natural Mother of the Child by Chris Malcolm Beck is not a book I've read yet, but is one that is on my TBR and is about trans parenthood. And then Kirsty Logan has written a non-fiction book which came out recently, which is about queer motherhood, so you may want to check that one out too. Jen, I'm looking for something similar to Poor Things by Alistair Gray. Poor Things is a socio-political satire and it is based on Frankenstein and Beauty and the Beast and is one of my favourite books of all time. I recently read The Centre by Aisha Manazir Siddiqui, and they're very different books, but I did get that same feeling because it is a social commentary and it is quite meta. It's a book about translation and translation as an extension of colonialism. It is a book that has horror elements to it as well, body horror, like Poor Things does too, because that is about creating a person for yourself to love. And in The Centre, it's about recreating yourself so that people will perceive you differently. And it's about power grabbing and power dynamics, which is also something that's discussed in Poor Things. So I'd recommend that. Jen, I would like a book for someone who loved braised pork and Our Wives Under the Sea on your recommendations. Ghost Music by Anne Yu, that's the same author as Braised Pork, and I think I preferred this novel of hers to Braised Pork. I think they're both brilliant, but Ghost Music is her more recent one, and if you haven't checked that one out, I would recommend it. It's about a woman who lives with her mother-in-law and finds out things about her husband that she would maybe rather not know. I'd also recommend Pew by Catherine Lacey, which has a similar unsettling feel to it. It's about a tight-knit community where a child turns up one day and the community can't work out if this child is a girl, is a boy, what race they are, how old they are, and they keep trying to find out all these details, categorize this person and fit them into boxes, and it becomes very dark. I think about that book all the time. Jen, I'd like a book like Bear or Mrs. Caliban. I would recommend Poor Things by Alistair Gray. I'm going to reverse this one from a few recommendations ago. I'm going to recommend this because, as I mentioned in that particular request, Poor Things is a book about creating a loved one for yourself and the morals of that. And I think that Bear and Mrs. Caliban are also about those things: power imbalance in relationships, relationships between people and creatures that you maybe wouldn't expect to see. I don't know what number this is. The next one, a recommendation for my grandma, please. She loves long family sagas. She doesn't like anything too violent or explicit. This Green and Pleasant Land by, who is that by? That is by Aisha Malik. That is a family saga about a man called Bilal whose mother is dying, and on her deathbed she says that she would like him to build a mosque in their local sleepy English village, and he then goes out to do that and a slight chaos ensues. I would also recommend my favourite ever family saga, which is A Place for Us by Fatemeh Farheen Mirza, which is about 5 members of an Indian American Muslim family told over, I think, about 20 years, and it's one of the most beautiful things I've ever read. Jen, I would like something like Love in the Big City, a contemporary queer book about a character navigating life, not necessarily tragic or happy, just middle of the road. Another book in translation, which is about queer characters just living their lives, is Happy Stories Mostly by Norman Erickson Passeribu. Some of these stories are sad, some of them are not. I think it's in a similar vein to Love in the Big City, so I think if you like that, you would enjoy this short story collection too. Jen, I would like something like Mariana Enriquez and your book, The Beginning of the World in the Middle of the Night. So strange, quirky short stories with magical realism elements. I would recommend What It Means When a Man Falls from the Sky by Leslie Necker-Arama. I'd also recommend the anthology Outsiders. This is published by Three of Cups Press, and this is a press that's closing down soon. So if you've been meaning to get your hands on this anthology, you should do it now. I think the book is half price and will be gone soon. And this is an anthology with work by me, Alice Slater, Julia Armfield, who else? Kirsty Logan, Leonie Ross, lots of people. So if you like Mariana Enriquez, I think you will love this short story collection too. Jen, I would like a recommendation for my sister who loves Shirley Jackson and Mary Shelley. I would recommend The Bass Rock by Evie Wilde, which is a story about 3 women who are drawn to this place called the Bass Rock and are all in some way connected with it, and it is quite gothic. It has witchcraft elements to comment on patriarchal society. I'd also recommend Follow Me to Ground by Sue Rainsford, which is about a daughter and father who seem to have the ability to heal people by burying them in the ground. Jen, my brother likes to write, reading all the time, enjoys spicy food. He is a language nerd and an interior designer by profession. Through your recommendations, I have previously gifted him The Secret Lives of Church Ladies and 50 Sounds by Polly Barton, both of which he loved. So this is not a book I have read yet, but I was sent a copy of it recently and I'm very excited by it. It's called National Dish by Anya von Bremzen. It's a very beautiful book, which should hopefully appeal to the interior designer in him, but it also links in with language because this is a book about food around the world. You also said he likes spicy food, so I assume he likes food in general. So this is about looking at lots of different countries and national dish, why it's their national dish, the history of that, and I just think it sounds great. Jen, my sister loves the water and anything maritime related. She normally reads nonfiction but enjoys fiction too. So I've got 2 nonfiction books about water that I haven't read yet myself. There's Fathoms by Rebecca Giggs, which is about, I think she's an Australian writer, and she is studying blue whales, and she thinks about blue whales and climate change and how the life of a blue whale may help us understand more about the climate. And then there is Below the Edge of Darkness by Edith Widder, who is a microbiologist, and when she was studying, she lost her sight. I think it was temporary, but then she became really interested in light and how that interacts with the ocean, and thinking about the deep ocean as well. So both of those sound really, really fascinating and are sitting on my shelf waiting for me to read them. Jen, my brother has been enjoying medieval/old English poetry like Beowulf and wants to get into more contemporary poetry with similar themes. He has mentioned enjoying Sylvia Plath, Simon Armitage, and Mary Oliver. I'd recommend Charlotte Eichler because she includes a lot of folklore in her work, and also Alice Oswald, especially her collection of Falling Awake, which has a mythology element to it. Jen, I live in the US. My neighbours are Ukrainian refugees. I would love to gift a book to their 13-year-old son, a memoir of refugee experiences or a graphic novel. My go-to recommendation would be When Hitler Stole Pink Rabbit by Judith Kerr, which is a novelised version of her experience of fleeing Germany in the early 1930s because her dad was a Jewish journalist who was outspoken against Hitler, and they travelled to Switzerland and then to France and then to England, living in those places for many years. And it's about how they settled in and made friends there or didn't make friends there. I would also really recommend the graphic novel by Sean Tan called The Arrival. It has no words in it, which I think means it's actually particularly brilliant because anybody can read this no matter what language they are speaking. And it is about being a refugee or being displaced. And it has this magical realism element to it, which makes it just so, I don't know, it adds this whole other element to it, and it's extraordinary. I think it's brilliant. Jen, I'm looking for a book like Station 11 or Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. I would recommend The Raptures by Jan Carson, which is about a school where the children, apart from one, seem to be getting sick and dying. I'd also recommend Severance by Ling Ma. That one is particularly relevant to the Station 11 part of your question. It is a dystopian book looking at power and storytelling and immigration, and again is one of those books that I think about often. I don't know if it was one of my favourite books of the year that I read it, but it has absolutely stayed with me. Okay, we are nearish the end. I think we've got about maybe 10 left, so let's whiz through. Jen, I would like crime books, please. My mother has read most of them. I mean, that's quite a bold statement. So something more niche, perhaps. Has she read All Yours by Claudia Pinheiro? That's a book in translation, so I think she's probably less likely to have read that. It's about a woman who finds out that her husband has killed someone, so she decides to try and help cover up the crime without telling him about it. Maybe a backlist title like Red Room by Nikki French, if she's read more contemporary stuff. And going even further back, Still Missing by Beth Gutchen is a book from the 80s, a crime book that I read last year, and it was one of my favourite books. It was incredible. Jen, do you have a book that I can buy multiple copies of to gift to friends and couples, e.g. coffee table books? I don't tend to buy the same book to give to loads of different people because I do think it's nice to tailor to specific people, but I can give you a publisher recommendation who do amazing coffee table books on all kinds of subjects. So I'm sure if you go through the catalogue on their website, you'll be able to find something for pretty much everyone. And that is Taschen. I think they're a German company and they publish art books, but also stuff on comics, things on architecture, history of fairy tales, circuses, so much. Their website's incredible. I'll link it down below. Jen, can you recommend a book set in the wilderness with beautiful descriptions? Wolf Border by Sarah Hall is about rewilding wolves into the Lake District. It's a great novel. Jen, I want something similar to Amy Bender's Willful Creatures or Julia Armfield's Salt Slow. I can recommend my short story collection, The Beginning of the World in the Middle of the Night, which is a collection of stories set in worlds where people can buy hearts online to transplant into their loved ones, where plants are sprouting from teenagers' bodies, and where there is a nighttime aquarium. It has fairy tale elements to it and also representation of disability and disfigurement as well. I'd also recommend Flowers of Mold by Ha-Sung Mang, which is a set of Korean short stories and has those twisted fairy tale elements that you're looking for. Jen, I'm looking for a book for my mum. She loves Victoria Hislop and anything set on islands. This is a book I actually didn't like at all, but loads of people love it. It just really divides people. So look up the writing style online and see if you think your mum will like it. Because if you think she will like it, she'll probably love it. It's called Island of Missing Trees by Elif Shafak, and it was one of the Women's Prize books last year. Jen, I'm looking for a gift for my brother. He likes short horror and Japanese fiction. Revenge by Yoko Ogawa is a brilliant collection of horror short stories set around an apartment block and one of my favourite short story collections ever. Books about being Jewish and having a disability. Have you read Kenny Fries? I've only read one of his books so far, which is called In the Province of the Gods, but it's about him travelling to Japan as a disabled person to research disability. He also touches on being Jewish in that book, but I think that many of his other titles more specifically focus on being Jewish and disabled. He has poetry books too. Jen, a book to break up a year-long reading slump, myth/cryptozoology themes. Good audio is a plus. I don't know if there's an audiobook of this, but Strange Beasts of China by Yang Gi is a brilliant book about cryptozoology. It's about a journalist who lives in, I think it's in Beijing, and they hear that there may be mythical creatures roaming around the city, so they go out to try and find them. It was one of my favourite books a couple of years ago. Jen, can you recommend a non-fiction book about the power of books in life? Have you read the Bookshop Book? I am biased, I wrote it. It's about 300 weird and wonderful bookshops around the world and the power of books. If you have read that, I would recommend a coffee table book called Can You Read Me? I also have a bit of writing in that too, but it has lots of writing in it from other people. And again, it's about the power of books and bookshops. Jen, I'm looking for a recommendation for myself. Early 30s, struggling to feel satisfied with life and lack of love. Let me recommend 3 short story collections to you which have a host of characters that feel this way. So there's Sabasam's Send Nudes. There is Thomas Morris's short story collections, especially his book We Don't Know What We're Doing, and Watching Women and Girls by Danielle Pender. All of these short story collections have characters in their early 20s, 30s who are trying to figure out life, don't know what they're doing, and feel not so great about it. But I don't recommend these as a oh, other people feel this way, I'm going to wallow in it. I just think it's quite comforting to read books about people going through similar experiences to you, and these books are all brilliantly written. All right, final one. Jen, I loved The Woman in the Purple Skirt. Can you recommend something similar? So that is by Natsuko Imamura. And did you know that she has a new book out? It just came out, so maybe you don't. It's part of the Pushkin Japanese novella series, and this is a book called This is a Miko, Do You Copy? This is a novella about a young girl who struggles to express herself and communicate with other people. So it sounds like it's in a similar vein to The Woman in the Purple Skirt, so maybe you will enjoy it. I have spoken for so long that the light has changed so much. I'm hoping it wasn't as noticeable, given it will be gradual over this video, but I'm nearly sitting in darkness. Thank you so much for being here. If I didn't answer your bookish conundrum in this video and you would like me to, you can leave a comment down below and I will type a response. If you need me to clarify any title that you missed, also leave a comment. I will reply there. If you would like to check out Serious Readers, that would be lovely. They're linked in the description. Thanks again to them for sponsoring this video. And don't forget, I'm doing Vlogmas over on Patreon in December. So if you would like to join, it's $2 for the whole month of December. And that is linked in the description box down below as well. Okay, I am gonna go get myself a cup of tea because I think I need it. Thank you so much for being here. I hope you enjoyed it. If you're new to my channel and you did and you would like to subscribe, that would be amazing. And I will see you for another video next Sunday. Lots of love. Bye.